unmuted.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Half and Half on this lovely Saturday morning. We're going to start with some work on breath and the shoulder girdle I mentioned in the chat. So the shoulder girdle is the structure of your collarbones and your scapula, your shoulder blades, your collarbones, your collarbones, your shoulder blades, and your sternum, which is like where they attach to the rib right there. So it's a circle around the body that we sometimes call the shoulder girdle. And then, of course, the shoulders are more where the arm hits, right? We know that. Those are all involved in that. And then we've got the rib cage, which is where the lungs are, which is where the breath is occurring. So every time I take an inhale and an exhale, there's some effect on the rib cage, which means there's some effect on the shoulders. And so some of the strap work we do all the time, you might notice it's really connected to a certain breath rhythm. And then also there's this organic connection between the breath, the rib cage, the movement of the shoulders, the way the neck engages, the way the arms engage, all of that. So we're just going to play around with some of those ideas. And then also look at just creating a little easier breath as you do movement and some of the places that typically get tight and that we could typically open. So I mentioned you were going to want a strap or a towel. And especially for this first part, I think a little longer towel is better. So if you have a longer kitchen towel or even like a scarf, maybe you could use in the very beginning, that a little bit of length I think is going to be helpful. So, but you can do it with this is a normal size kitchen towel, so you can do it with that. You can just take it by the corner ends, which makes it appear a little bit longer, and then set it on your back, mid back, like the lower part of the rib cage there. For me, it's right below my sports bra line, right in through there. And then holding it on either end, yeah? And then, of course, you can use the strap, which is often too long, so I double it over, and that same sort of thing. So each one has a little bit of benefit, right? Like the strap is a little longer, so it's maybe a little easier to hold, but the towel is a little wider, and sometimes that's kind of nice. So, silver linings everywhere, pros and cons to everything. So we're going to start with that position there, and I'm just kind of loosely holding that. And the reason I'm hitting this mid part of the back, this lower half of the rib cage, is that's where the diaphragm is. So we have the diaphragm muscle taking up kind of the bottom half of the rib cage, and then the lungs in the upper, sort of the top half, top to mid half of the rib cage there. So the diaphragm muscle is where the movement originates, right? So that mid part of the rib cage, we need some movement down there because the muscle's contracting and releasing. And then, of course, the whole rib cage is going to move as the lungs expand and release with the breath. But we're going to start in that space. So I've got just enough tension to know that it's not slack. No more than that, right? It's almost slack, but I just hold it enough that it's not totally releasing. And then I'm going to think of almost like leaning back into it. And you might even like let your weight drift back onto your heels. And just see what that's like. Like as your arms pull forward, if I pull too far forward, it pulls my rib cage forward. So I have just a little bit of tension, and then I imagine I could lean back into that tension, right where my ribs are. And then I'm going to increase that just a little by breathing into that feedback. So I'm going to inhale, letting the back ribs start to open up. And then exhale, I'm going to feel it just sort of return. So the inhale is letting the ribs push back into the strap a little. And then exhale and feel how that softens. And you don't have to keep your hands rigid, right? If you feel that your ribs push back into the strap and that makes your hands change their position a little bit, right? Like maybe mine get a little wider as I inhale and exhale. That'd be fine. We want to encourage the movement in the back lower ribs and use the strap or the towel as feedback. And then you might also notice I have my knees a little bit soft. That's always really helpful. Seems unrelated, but keeping the knees from locking will often let you breathe a little more fluidly. And then I'm noticing if my weight's shifting forward or back on my balls of my feet or my heels. So when I do that inhale and I open the back, it almost shifts my weight. It just a tiny bit backwards. So we're going to open up that space even a little bit more. So again, bend your knees a little. Now, like really bend them. Roll forward, and you might just take a look first before you do it, because I'm not rolling that far. I'm going to roll forward with my head and my upper chest. I don't want my butt to go backwards, so my pelvis just stays right where it is. But again, I'm trying to emphasize feeling that mid back lower part of the ribs opening up. So in this place too, same thing we just did standing, but just a tiny bit forward. See if you can breathe into your towel or into your strap. Create a little more openness in that mid back place. And then the next time you do an inhale, with that openness, on the exhale, see if you can keep it as you roll up. And then we'll just play with that same thing again. So breathing in, open up the back. Keep some of that space as you exhale and roll forward that far. Check in with your hands. If you pull too much with your hands, it's going to be hard to open that space. Take a couple breaths, keeping it open. And then an inhale. Feel the openness and roll back up. Imagine it stays really broad through there. You're holding the strap, but not pulling. One more time. Take a breath in, find the openness. Keep it as you exhale. The ribs kind of like a fan, opening up each little rib, all the spaces in between the ribs. Inhale, you get a little more of that openness. Couple breaths. And then find the openness with an inhale and imagine keeping it pretty spacious as you roll up. And then just relax your strap or your towel. Take a couple breaths. I'm going to close my eyes because it's nice. You can feel a little more. What does it feel like without the strap there? Can you still feel the space through the back ribs, through the side ribs? And then opening your eyes if you have them closed. So I remember, I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, in yoga classes, people would use the imagery of filling up the lungs from the bottom to the top, right? Like a three-part breathing, you'd go from the base to the top. You'd hear about like filling it up like a glass of water. I don't know, for some reason, sand is coming into my mind. I don't know if people said that, or like you were pouring something into the lung and the bottom filled first and then it filled up through. And I actually usually really struggled with that image. And I think part of it was that I was really tight through the lower part. And to imagine the rib going low in the lung, it's like I couldn't quite get there. And when I got there, I was already really tense in my chest. Like trying to get the bottom part would make me tense my chest. It was like just a hard image to work with. And I'm now going to give you that image to work with because I find if I can get this moving first, then I'm just going to see how far up the breath rises after. So I'm going to breathe into this lower part and then just allow for there to fill up a little more into the upper part. So maybe my glass has a little bit of water in it, maybe it's half full, maybe it gets a little fuller. Start at the bottom and then just see how much moves a little higher as you go. See what that's like for you. You could put your hands here if you want. That's sort of helpful. Or you could take them down if that feels better. And what is really nice about that image is it's asking you not to rush into a big chest breath. That the chest fills up not because you lift it up, but because it's building into that. And once it starts to build up a little higher, I start to feel a little movement in my shoulders too, like I was talking about before, that shoulder girdle, collarbones, sternum, shoulder blades, maybe even into your armpits a little. Okay, so we're going to keep playing with that image wherever it is for you, right? Like maybe it fills up a little, maybe you feel some movement in the shoulder, maybe it's subtle. It's often subtle. It's subtle for me, but I do feel it moving through there. We're going to keep working with that idea. So we're going to get your towel again or your strap again. I have my feet a little wider now. My knuckles are pointing down, my elbows are pointing a little bit out. And so again, when we do the strap work, we often do this little pull out, and release, and pull out, and release. We do that with the inhale. Every time I inhale, I do a pull out. Every time I exhale, I release. So what if you were to think of combining those two things we just did, that the inhale's opening the back ribs, the side ribs, it has a little bit of effect through the shoulders, getting wider. That helps the hands pull. And as you exhale, it all softens in. Now, that's probably going to mean we're all going at a slightly different rhythm because we're all probably breathing at a slightly different rhythm. So try to match your own natural inhale for the out pull, your exhale for the release. Play with that for a few breaths. It's probably a little slower than we normally do it. And again, I'm still thinking about my hands. If I get too concerned about a super hard pull on the strap, everything just kind of falls to pieces. I lose the breath, I lose the shoulders, I lose the elbows. But if I start from the breath, let it move to the shoulders, let it move through the upper back and the elbows. The hands are just, they're like a little piece. They're not any more important than anything else. They're maybe a little less important. One more time, take that pull. Hold the pull as you exhale this time. And then we're going to add in the up and down with the breath. So as you take your arms up to just below your shoulders, think about that feeling of letting the back ribs just slightly lean into the towel like we did earlier. So your arms are going to go up. You're going to inhale. The back ribs open into the towel, into the strap. Exhale, you come down. So let's play with that a little. And so again, you can take your rhythm. It's a lot to think about. So you might be moving a little more slowly. I find when I have a lot to think about, I move a little more slowly. But it's not required that you do it slowly. If you're feeling it at a slightly faster tempo. 2 more. And then 1 more time, taking it up and hold it there. And then let's try the pulls out in this position. Inhale. And exhale, release it. So whatever image is working for you, use that. We've got shoulders, hands, breath, low ribs, filling up the lungs from the bottom. Two more. And on your last one, when you pull out, keep that. So to bring the arms overhead, now we just take that image of the breath starting down low. It moves up, it affects the shoulders, and then we get this sense of the arms getting to continue that movement, right? The breath doesn't lift my arms up, doesn't make that much movement, but my arms are going to emphasize that movement a little bit by going up. So I'm going to inhale, arms go up. I'm going to exhale, they come back down. And as my arms go up, I'm going to start with that low rib image first. Like I could still breathe back into the strap in my low ribs. And arms float up, inhale, breathing through the low ribs. And keeping that sense of the low ribs, if you want, if it works for you, you might start imagining how it travels up. And the inhale does have a relationship to the arms floating up. It opens the upper lungs, it makes a little more space in the armpits, and the arms also do that as they reach up. And lower your arms for a moment. Okay, so we're going to do that one again. And just to give you a little sort of a moment to visualize, this is not necessarily new information, but all the time I talk about taking the arms overhead and not pushing your low ribs forward. So can you, in this moment, use the breath through the back ribs to keep the low ribs from going forward? And then as you lift the shoulders up, can you keep, right? Can you use that sense of lifting the shoulders up to give you a little more space in your upper lungs, to create a little more stretch through the chest as you go? So the breath is helping me keep my ribs in place, my low ribs in place. And then the movement of the shoulders is helping me keep my low ribs in place and also giving me more breath. Yeah. So let's just do it again. Let's just play with it again. See if you can feel that. So arms are reaching slightly out, elbows are a little bit bent. Arms go up with the inhale and they come down with the exhale. So keeping the arms overhead, next time you're there, we're just going to add a little more to this. And that's to open the side body just a little bit. So I'm going to inhale and reach over to one side. I'm reaching over to my left, so my right side. Now those ribs get to open on the right. And exhale back to center. And then I can do that on the left. Inhale, the left side ribs get to open. And exhale, they come back together. So we just sort of slipped another image in. Breathe into the side ribs. Fan open the ribs on one side and then stack them back together. And I'm still using that lower back rib image too, because my lower ribs still want to pinch. They still want to push forward. And I'm still thinking of the shoulder lifting a little bit off the rib cage. Just one side at a time now. Last one. And taking your arms down. And like things might be a little tired. Things are a little tired for me around my shoulder and a little bit in these like muscles in the back of my neck and kind of side of my neck, which isn't always a bad thing. As long as it doesn't feel locked, but you get a little warmth there, you get a little movement there, it's nice to get those muscles moving. But maybe move your shoulders around a little, kind of let all that go. Okay, so let's do one more, which is taking the strap behind you. Hands shoulder distance apart here, elbows just a little soft, so it's a little tighter in. So when your arms go behind you, maybe you think, I often think, oh, this is going to be such a nice stretch in my chest and the front of my shoulders. And maybe you pull your shoulder blades together and like reach way, way back and take a stretch. Your ribs go way, way forward. But it feels really nice on your chest, right? To do that. It's okay, but it's not what we're doing today, right? So we're going to try that same thing, leaving the ribs in place, leaving the shoulder blades really wide, and it's going to be a slightly different stretch on your chest. It's going to be a deeper stretch on your chest. We're going to get a little deeper in to things around the ribs, things a little closer to the ribs. We're going to use the breath to actually open up the spaces between the ribs and the collarbone, as opposed to just stretching the chest muscles, right? Like the pec muscles. Not so much that. So same thing we've been doing, right? Inhale. Back ribs stay open. Exhale back down. And here's where the glass of water image works for me pretty well in this one. After doing all that, if I think about my back ribs and I reach my arms back, I do really feel it float up into my chest. I keep it really open through the bottom portion of the ribs. And I can feel how the chest starts to open as my arms reach back. And then we have another little danger, which is that you start looking down and your head starts hanging forward. If your head stays in line, you're going to get a better effect. So keep looking out. One more. And then relax with the strap. Okay, so let's come down to your mat. And we only have a few minutes left because we did so much with that, but I think Scott's going to have a great time like playing with that as well. So, but one thing that I think is so great to do when you've really got the breath moving well and you've really got the shoulders sort of warmed up is to see what the 100 is really like. Like, what's it all about? This 5-count inhale, 5-count exhale, while you're trying to work your abdominals at the same time. I mean, I'm going to close off the place I usually breathe, which is my belly, possibly, and maybe my chest. And both those things are a little closed off in the 100. And then I'm going to try to take a really long breath, right? So that's pretty challenging, and that's the point. That can I really fill up like all the little crevices that I don't always use to create breath, all the spaces in my lungs by going into the backspace of the armpits and the low ribs, and side ribs, and maybe a little bit in the chest, but not as much as I might normally. And get that full count inhale and then squeeze all the air out. Joe Pilates loved to talk about like squeezing every little drop of air out of the lungs with the exhale. So that sense of really, really, really full exhale and using the belly to emphasize that. So earlier with the strap on the back, we did that little roll forward. You breathed into your back and you kept it as you rolled up. That roll forward position, that's the 100 position, right? Here I am. If I were standing and I did that little bit of roll forward, the breath, the inhale is going to move down into those back ribs. It's going to move through the upper back. It's going to move through the armpits, right? Belly's going to really work on the exhale. So we get to do it. Isn't that fun? So don't worry if you get like distracted by your arms and the counting and all that today. Don't worry too much about it. Take your nice full breath in, take your nice full breath out. Figure out what that pace is for you. If it's not 5, it's okay. Do 3 and 3, do 4 and 4. Try to keep the breath pretty even, but don't worry as much about the pumps. So, tabletop, exhale, find your upper body curl, and then here we go, inhaling, exhaling, and then just working with that. I start to feel like the breath actually holds me up, inflating the back, helps me keep my upper body off the floor. 2 more times. And then bend your knees in and rest your head. Take one leg out, hold on to the other. Roll up to sitting. Switch legs. Roll back down. Just a little sneak bonus exercise. Easter eggs. I always talk about adding Easter eggs in. We could call this an Easter egg. Because the breath also helps with this movement here. Breathing through the upper back. Exhale, softening the chest, drawing the belly in. I switched legs again. Opening the upper back. Exhale, drawing the belly in. Switch legs one more time, or if you didn't switch legs, switch legs. One more time coming up. Let the breath open your back. Let the exhale draw your belly in. And coming up. Okay, so let's see what Scott does with that. We'll let him come in and I'll move all my toys.
Morning, everybody. So what Colette went through with you there is one of the main reasons I've reversed the breathing in a lot of what I do. And having taught yoga for a long, long time, what I found for a lot of people when they'd inhale and take their arms up, the whole rib cage would shift and the upper part of the chest rarely if ever opened up. Whereas when we'd exhale, With the exhale, the ribs naturally go down. If we then took the arms up, just like you explored before, there's this really nice opening that occurs. So let's take what you just worked on and see how it takes form in a yoga sun salutation. So to begin, let's deepen the breath a bit. So a little deeper inhale. And slightly lengthen your out breath. Feel how that connects you to your belly. A little deeper inhale. Use the exhale to connect to your belly. So maybe you're already feeling how your rib cage is starting to open up. Now we're going to use the breath and the movement to deepen that opening. With the exhale, take your arms to the side up. Remember how you explored lifting your shoulders. Then with the inhale, when you fold, this opens your upper back. So you can breathe, inhale deeper. Then with the exhale, stretch the crown of your head forward, keeping your lower ribs knit. Then inhale, folding, another chance to open your upper back. Exhale all the way up, another chance to open your upper chest. Inhale, arms down. Again like that. Exhale, both arms up. Inhale, folding. Exhale, gorilla. Inhale, folding. Exhale all the way up. Inhale, arms down. This one together quietly. And a couple breaths here. Now let's continue that exploration, opening the upper chest, shoulder, armpit region. Begin with an in-breath. Lengthen that exhale as you sweep your arms up. Inhale, fold. Exhale, gorilla. And then stepping your feet back to head down dog. So if you remember that feeling of the strap or the towel against your lower back ribs. So same feeling here. Inhale into your lower back ribs, broadening, opening. Then lengthening your out breath. Feel how that connects you to your lower belly. Keeping that connection, inhale into lower back ribs, opening them. Exhale. So one more breath here. Exhale, gorilla. Inhale, folding. Exhale all the way up. Inhale, arms down. Couple breaths here, using those breaths to affect positive changes in your body. Using the exhale to connect to your lower belly. Using the inhale to open your ribs, particularly your back ribs. Now we're going to make our way to the floor. So to begin, inhale into your back. Exhale, arms to the side up. This particular breath movement combo to open your upper chest. Inhale, folding. Exhale, gorilla. Inhale, dog pose. We'll take a few breaths here. And then coming down to your knees. And then sitting in cross legs. Many cultures, this is a default position. So throughout the lifespan, young people, old people, comfortably sit cross-legged like this. Now for a lot of us, we sit in chairs quite a lot, and maybe you find that you're kind of sitting on the back of your sitting bones. So to your capacity, roll onto the mid to front parts of your sitting bones to sit upright. Now don't worry, we're not going to be here for hours on end, but maybe a couple minutes. Same breathing. Then with the exhale, turn to your right. Left hand comes across, right hand comes behind. In using your breathing to create those beneficial shifts in your body. Using the in-breath to open up your rib cage. Using the out-breath to connect to your source of support, your lower belly. Then turning back to the front. Few breaths here. And then turning to the other side. Right hand comes across, left hand behind. Couple more breaths. And then turning back toward the middle. Now going from a cross-leg position to a soul-to-soul position. Maybe soul-to-soul brings back memories of the 80s. That's my memory of when the band Soul to Soul was popular. So through 2 feet soul to soul, musical memories notwithstanding, lightly press your soles into each other to take your knees away from each other. Same deep breath. Then going from soul to outstretching your legs. Now you can probably see my knees are pretty bent, and that's so I can be on the front edge of my sitting bones. If I were to straighten my knees, then I'd end up on the back of the sitting bones like this right here. So let's go ahead and let knees bend as needed so that you can sit upright. Then folding forward. Go ahead and let your spine round. If you have a lower back injury, you probably already know not to round your lower back. But for pretty much all of us, flexing the spine is a natural movement of the spine. So once you've found that spine flexion, 10%, not a lot. Straightening your knees 10%. And we'll hold here for a few breaths. And then with the exhale coming up. Now making your way onto your back. So just like you did a little bit earlier, we're going to start off with knees bent, feet flat upon the floor. Remember that feeling of the towel against your back ribs? So imagine now that you're lying atop an enormous towel. It's the size of your room. And then with the inhale, let your ribs sink into your wall-to-wall towel. So when I first started learning Pilates, this was a very different approach, this idea of inhale into the back. But in my body, I found it was revolutionary. One of the very first things I noticed was that my knees stopped hurting. And then as I continued exploring this sort of breath, I found that, wow, my upper chest is opening more than when I did all those chest openings. Well, speaking of chest openers, let's do a little bit of supine twisting. So to begin, bring your knees in, bring your legs in, and then roll onto your left side. So pretty much in a fetal position on your left side. Then take your left arm out, bring your right arm up, and if possible, rest the back of your head on the floor. And if it's not possible, you can go ahead and use that towel to serve as a pillow. Then keeping leg on top of leg, keeping that left arm outstretched. Now take that right arm into the space back behind you. That's far enough. So rather than preferencing bring your hand to the floor, actually slightly lift your right hand up to let your right shoulder drop to the floor. And a few deep breaths right here. Now with the next out breath, bring that right arm up. Back to fetal position. Back to your back. At the risk of overusing the word back. So now the second side will be to roll to your right side, ending up more or less a fetal position. And now take your left arm skyward, ending up on the back of your head. Now taking that left arm into the space back behind you. And that's about far enough right there. It's really easy here to get wrapped up in trying to take the hand to the floor. In the big picture, really not that helpful. To really open your upper chest, free up your shoulder. Actually lift your hand up so that the corresponding shoulder can drop down. Steady breathing. Left arm exhale coming up, back to fetal position, back to your back, and then bring your feet to the floor. So once you feel your feet on the floor, draw your feet in just a little bit closer. No need to pull or push or otherwise force. Just comfortably close in. And now use the next exhale to connect to your belly. Good. Inhale into your back. Exhale, connect to your belly. Good. Maintaining that breathing. Now with the next out breath, use your belly muscles to press your lower back down and lift your pelvis up. We're going to pause there for a moment. So that's what's called posterior tip of the pelvis. Now what we're going to do next, it's going to be harder and harder to keep that posterior tip. But it becomes more and more important that you do so, at least to get the good benefits. So with the exhale to cultivate posterior tip of the pelvis, lift your pelvis. And here we are in the bridge pose. So what a lot of times happens is because the fronts of the hips and the quads are tight, that the movement ends up dumping into the lower back. So we're using the out breath to connect to the belly, to help align the pelvis and lower back, to both keep lower back happy, and maybe you're starting to feel a little bit more opening in the fronts of your hips and your quads. Now, cultivating that posterior tilt as you lower down. And then coming up to sitting. So not that long ago, we did a cross legs. Now crossing your legs the other way. So best you can, moving from the backs of the sitting bones to the fronts. Deeper breathing. Remember all that strap work? Finding this freedom to breathe deeply. That applies here as well. So now twisting to your right, left hand comes across, right hand behind. Breathing in the way that opens up your ribs. And letting this movement, this rotation, help open up your ribs. Next exhale back to the middle. Now to your left. Right hand comes across, left hand behind. Letting both the movement, the twist, and the breathing, this deeper breathing, help cultivate freedom in your upper torso. And coming back toward the middle. And then making your way back to hands and knees. And then from hands and knees back to dog pose. A few of those deeper breaths here. And with the next exhale, stepping your feet forward. Inhale, folding. Exhale all the way up. Inhale, arms down. Right, so that's been a lot of discussion about using the breath to help open. And openness and freedom is really important in the body, but not to neglect building muscle. And so we're going to do a handful of exercises here to not only work on building strength, which is mainly in your neural system, but also building the muscles themselves. So step your feet a little bit apart, feet just a little bit turned out, and then bring your arms forward like you're going to hug a tree. And then with the exhale, bend your ankles, your hips, and your knees. And inhale, coming up. So you can probably see I'm going pretty far down. You don't have to go that far down. Exhale. Inhale. Up and down like that. So squats are one of the best exercises for building the muscles of your legs, both the fronts and the backs. They're also really good for building your glutes. And as we do just a few more here, these kind of squats are also really good to strengthen your back muscles. One more. And stepping your feet back together, letting your arms hang. A few deep breaths. So now let's work on some knee push-ups. So we're going to make our way to the floor. Begin with the in-breath. Exhale, arms to the side, up. Inhale, folding. Exhale, gorilla. Inhale, folding. We'll take a few breaths here. And coming down to your knees. And then on your hands and knees, bring your pelvis forward so that your knees, your hips, and your shoulders are all lined up. Then have your hands a little bit wider than your shoulders. And then bring your neck and head in line with your knees, hips, and shoulders. So let's start with a little bit of bend. Exhale, bend your elbows. Inhale, straighten. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. So as long as your head isn't tipping forward, feel free to explore bending your elbows more. And as we do a few more, these are so good for your arms, your shoulders, your core, your chest muscles, and your upper back. So next time you're back at straight elbows, pausing there. Turn your toes under and moving into dog pose. We'll take a few breaths here. And then coming down. So then transitioning to your back, we're going to do 3 roll downs. Hard to overestimate how important it is to have a strong core. So with your knees bent, feet on the floor, come up to sitting any old way. Now with your hands behind your legs, remember that posterior tip of the pelvis. Begin with that and articulate your spine segment by segment by segment. And you can use your hands to help control your descent. All the way down. No style points. Come up to sitting any which way to help tone your core. Arms can help. Posterior pelvic tilt. Setting down your lower back first, piece by piece. Then remember where the towel was at the outset. See if you can articulate those segments. And then your upper back. All the way back. Last one. Coming up to sitting any which way. And controlling your descent using your belly muscles. Slowly, slowly lowering down. Segment by segment, piece by piece, relaxing your shoulders and your neck. And then resting on your back. Let your breathing be. We've been controlling the breathing quite a lot. So as useful as that can be in moderation, let it go. Let your breathing be. And as you let your breathing be, let your mind be. If your mind is devoid of thoughts, noticing that experience. If your mind is filled with thoughts, noticing that experience. Letting your breathing be, letting your mind be. We'll take a few more moments quietly. Then if you've closed your eyes, now opening your eyes. And then making your way up to sitting to greet your cat friend. I think a lot of you know Buddy Cat. He's the cat emeritus. He's my 19-year-old friend. So really glad you could join us here today for half and half. Have some fun events coming up. Actually, in 15 minutes, we're doing an open house. And we've grown at Pilates in Harrison so much over the past few months with all the different classes and variety that we have an open house so that we can talk about our programs, all our many instructors, and then a chance for you to ask any questions about what's this program or what's that program. So that's free and that's coming up. I think you'll find a link in the chat box to that event. And as ever, so glad you could join us. Any questions?
On bridge, how close should your feet and knees be to each other? Is closer better?
Yeah. So in bridge, how close should the feet and the knees be? And no closer than hip width apart. In fact, I like to have the feet sometimes a little bit farther apart. And the main guide is going to be your knees. That if you feel a pulling or pain in your knees, then you want to do a little experimenting about maybe the feet turning out a little bit, maybe the feet a little bit wider apart, maybe narrower. So it's a little bit of trial and error to find the place where there's not the strain on your knees. Great question.
And Kevin was saying this is the best class of his whole life. He really likes it. Is the posterior pelvic tilt okay in downward dog?
Yes. So the question is, we did that posterior pelvic tilt, and we did that in bridge pose. And the question is that okay in downward dog? And to answer the question with a non-answer, it's not okay. So in general, what we're looking for in dog pose is creating the most length possible. You know, as we age, our spine tends to compress. That's why we tend to get shorter as we age. So in downward dog, anything to create length is the most important. And then if there's a little bit of a posterior tilt to accompany that lengthening, no problem. If kind of undoing that posterior tilt creates more length, all the better. All right, so great to see you all virtually, and hopefully we can connect in this forthcoming open house. Bye-bye.